John Dies at the End is a 2012 American dark fantasy science fiction comedy horror film written and directed by Don Coscarelli, starring Chase Williamson, Rob Mays, Paul Giamatti, Clancy Brown, and Doug Jones.
David Wong? David Wong? Did you doze off there? Black stuff, this soy sauce. So it's a drug, right?
Just tell me what this stuff is, John.
Effects don't last that long?
The side effects don't last that long. The effects will last the rest of my life, I think.
Why don't you tell me about your friend John? I mean, that stuff, Dave. I'm remembering things that haven't happened yet.
You got to be really brave to ask yourself the scary questions.
Your friend is the only known survivor. The rest are dead. He's not looking too healthy right about now.
It'd be opening doors to other worlds, man.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever seen, Arnie?
So, leave the police station right now during all the commotion.
There's another guy in here with me. It's another cop.
No, there's not. Check the mirror.
How does somebody get into this?
There's dead guys and drugs. It's kind of a long story, but now we can see things.
Things are in motion, Mr. Wong.
Nothing you're seeing is real.
I suppose you are wondering where you are.
You're having like a bad trip or whatever they call it.
But there is no magic.
Move now.
Got my attention, Mr. Wong.
Oh, it gets better. A lot better.
Coleman.
Yeah.
Coleman.
Yeah.
I can't hear you. Hold on. Can't hear you. Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Are you talking to me on a hot dog?
Yeah, I'm on the schnitzel.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. It must be that psychic link we have through the universe. You proved your point. Do you have a broken phone I can talk to you on?
Welcome back to the Cult of Films. I'm John, the host. That is Mr. Coleman Yeti.
Hello.
We are talking about I Die at the End, a 2012, hopefully just a movie and not a foreseeable look into my future. There's a lot of fortune telling in this film. Coleman, I don't know how to talk about this. This was one that you brought up. I have not seen this before, so this was a Coleman Yeti special. Why did you want to talk about John Dies at the End?
So I used to read a lot of Cracked articles in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. And there was an author for Cracked named David. Is it David Wong?
Yep.
Yeah. The author's name actually is David Wong, or at least that's his pen name. Mm-hmm. And so I read a whole article about how he had written a book that they were adapting to a movie to make this movie, John Dies at the End, and it just piqued my interest. So because I read so much Cracked, I had to go watch the movie and see what it was about. And I think that the movie delivered everything that it was trying to deliver.
Yeah, this movie was a way just super original. I was thoroughly impressed and entertained in a way where I'm like, if I sit down and try to thematically pick this film apart at all, I am not going to enjoy this. So this is a movie that you just need to let wash over you and probably smoke a lot of weed or drink a lot of alcohol or do whatever mind-altering substances that you prefer, and you will enjoy the hell out of this film.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This was kind of a labor of love too, because there were cult fans of the source material of the actual book, like you stated, from David Wong. One of those was Paul Giamatti. He was one of the ones that not only, you know, you have some first-time stars in this, like Chase Williamson and Rob Mays, I think, are making their acting debuts in this film, and they're the two leads. But you have people like Paul Giamatti and Clancy Brown and Doug Jones that fell in love with the source material of this, and Paul Giamatti was a producer. He got behind it and wanted to see everything. He said the worst part about making it a film was the things that got excluded for either budgetary reasons or time constraints out of the film because he just loved the entire thing so much. Did you read the book?
I have not read the book. I actually didn't even realize that it was a book, just because when I read the article, I only recall them talking about the fact that it was becoming a movie. And since we rewatched this and I discovered that it's a book, I may need to go back and read it. Yeah, I am definitely interested in reading this, and I think there's a new one like Jane punches something in the dick. Like, literally, that's the... Coleman, speaking of special guests, do you have a syringe full of soy sauce to accompany you tonight? Oh, I do. Seeing as how this movie seems to center around all kinds of hellish type creatures, I got Hellbent IPA to drink for this.
Oh,
yeah.
Excellent. Speaking of hell, I'm drinking another Modern Times Virtual Future because, you know, a lot of people are soothsayers and whatnot. A lot of fortune telling going on in this, so I will say L'Chaim. But you already knew that because you knew the future. Correct. Cheers. Cheers. Speaking of a hellish backdrop, I got major Constantine vibes from this film. I'm going to have to revisit Constantine. Actually, I think we're going to have to revisit Constantine on this show. Yeah. I remember loving that movie, but I don't recall all of the details. Sure. Yeah. Just in the way where it's like all these things are happening. Like there's these otherworldly things happening all around you at all times. We're just not enlightened enough to kind of notice them. And I love that premise. I love that premise in, like I said, like Constantine or like Miyazaki's Spirited Away. Like, it makes you feel like there's just strangeness in the mundane. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like a perfect recipe for an adventure movie. And I think that this kind of handles that brilliantly because it's like two different or a couple different dimensions are running parallel to each other and starting to bleed into each other. And it's all kind of tied together with this certain substance that's may or may not be alive called soy sauce. Correct. Right. And what happens if you don't take the soy sauce, right? So these dimensions are bleeding into each other, which you can only see if you take the soy sauce. But if this other dimension were to completely take over our dimension, would anyone even know it? Because nobody can see any of this stuff unless they're on the soy sauce. Right. This will probably be the one and only time where I'm just like, I'm going to question the rules of the movie just a little bit, because while they're on their adventure, they have certain ancillary characters with them. And I want to really focus on one in particular because I actually know the person, which was so cool to find out that Jimmy Wong, he's a big member of the Magic community, of the Magic the Gathering community. For anyone that doesn't know, that are just here for the films, he's part of the Command Zone. He's the co-host on that. He's also he plays a role in the new Mulan movie. But yeah, my buddy Jimmy Wong, like I say my buddy loosely, like I interact with him quite a bit on like Twitter and stuff, and I have done shows with his co-host Josh Lee Kwai. But yeah, Jimmy Wong plays Fred in here, so that's a huge like roundabout way of saying questioning why like someone like him that his character didn't take the soy sauce, or even like the police chief didn't take it, but they're also affected by it because of the bugs. I don't know. That was a little confusing to me. Yeah, I don't know. And I'd like to say to all of those of you that didn't know that John is a nerd, now you know. I think what I love about this movie, and I was waiting for you to pick the movie apart and to analyze it and to try to come up with some reasons and reasoning behind, you know, why this is speaking to society or whatever else, like movies that we've watched in the past. Sure. And what I love about this movie is it's very intentionally not any of that. It's very intentionally how many shitty horror comedy stereotypes can we just jam into this movie
and try to make it play. So it's very intentional. It's very self-aware. It's does not seem like it's trying to speak to society or, you know, carry any kind of message. It's the opposite of that. It's how can we just make this ridiculous movie and jam as much ridiculous shit as we can and call attention to it mid-movie.
Sure.
So they have like the fake Jamaican guy that is selling all of the selling the soy sauce or handing out the soy sauce or however he's getting it out there. And the main character, Dave, calls attention to, oh, you mean that fake Jamaican guy that was out there doing magic?
But I think that it does. Yes, I agree. It is the Harold and Kumar of of like horror, you know, films, but in a good way. I say that in a good way. I mean, there's a fucking literal random meat monster with a turkey head, but it's done really cool. What? Yeah,
and a brain.
Absolutely. Those things are really neat, and they didn't like skimp on the effects or anything. Like some of those creatures and the creature designs, like the slugs and those, like they look like the lickers from the Resident Evil movie, like that he has in the cage or in John's apartment. All that looks great, and this especially this movie was made for under $1 million blows my mind. This goes to show you what you can achieve as a filmmaker and as a group of excited people when you're excited about your project. This was definitely a passion piece. There's no way that Paul Giamatti, this movie is way below his skis, right?
Like what he does. He'd have been the budget. He'd have been over the budget.
100%. He would have been 5 times this budget. But the fact that he cared about this and he just loved the source material, that kind of things. And Doug Jones, who was like the perennial character, like he's the fawn in freaking Pan's Labyrinth. Like he's like this grotesque character actor, and he just gets to play Doug Jones, albeit creepy Doug Jones, but he gets to like be unmasked and just like do his thing. Like everyone was just having a blast with this. But going back to what you said as far as it being just kind of like a fun whatever, there is some moments like the opening scene of the voiceover when he's like explaining like having to keep repairing and changing out his axe is super cool. Like there is some really interesting and fantastic like set pieces, or you know, when he's in the trailer and he kind of like lays back once he's all like on the soy sauce and the floor kind of disappears and there's just like that galaxy. I mean, it's an easy green screen trick, but it's all done super effectively. So yes, it's kind of just like a vehicle for jokes, but there are some moments of like actual movie making brilliance in this, which I was extremely surprised and kind of taken aback by.
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of definitely cool stuff, and under $1 million, that's impressive. I'm curious now how they did some of the effects with the meat monster and all that kind of stuff. Plus you pay actors and everything else for $1 million. That's crazy. I love that riddle in the beginning where he's talking about the axe and he talks about the handle breaks, so you replace the handle, then the head breaks, so you have to replace the head, and says, you know, is that the same axe, when the zombie monster comes in and says that's the axe that killed me. Well, it's not, because the whole axe has been replaced. But it was a good, I mean, it was a well thought out riddle, development, whatever.
Yeah, and I think the fake Jamaican or whatever, his scene where it's just like a tight close-up on his face and he's going through, and it's kind of like the Morpheus and Neo scene where it's just like, you know, are you going to take the red pill or are you going to take the blue pill? Essentially the same scene from The Matrix, him kind of describing like, yeah, I know your dreams, I know this, and you know, you should question, and he's going over, I think his name's Dave, he's going over Dave's dream, and he's just like, yeah, you thought about your girlfriend and then a bomb went off because your brain predicted that thunder would happen in 20 seconds from you know, and that was just like, and he's like, the question of all of this, of all this bullshit of the story is, why did your brain knows that happened? I could be the one to open that door for you. Yeah.
Which is a thing that happens.
Totally. Yeah.
I feel
Where I'm
like we've all had experiences like that where you wake up from a dream.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not be that exact scenario, but you wake up from a dream and you go, whoa, how did this become a part of my dream, or how did my brain know that this was coming?
Yeah.
So there was depth to it too, which I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I just meant more behind the story itself.
Sure.
The story is not trying to prove any point. You know, the guy that wrote the book and wrote, I guess, helped adapt the movie is a smart guy. That's why I used to love to read those articles, because they were entertaining and well thought out and had good arguments. So that they really brought that to the movie, but the movie itself is just very intentionally, let's just pack it full of ridiculous stereotypes and, you know, everything else.
Right. It's Ghostbusters, right? Like, it's kind of the same deal. If the Ghostbusters had, you know, a heroin type substance that they needed to see the actual ghost, that was the difference. But it's funny, like you said. It's super brutal. Like, you know, we talked about House 2 not too long ago, and we're like, there's not a drop of blood in that. You could you know, show that movie in church. This film is just like fucking super brutal. They hold nothing back. People's heads are getting blown open. Yeah. They show up into this alternate world, and like everyone's naked because the aliens think that would put, you know, humans in comfort to see tits or whatever. But even like the masks that they wear are super creepy. Like, so it has a nice smattering of laughs, scares, and you're always uneasy, which was fun. And I love comedies that do that, and that's when I feel like they're successful. I could even think of like Taika Waititi's Jojo Rabbit.
Yes.
Or Jojo Rabbit, the entire time I was cracking up because it's so funny and it's written so well, but I'm always at the edge of my seat because I know something tragic could happen. I felt the same.
And does.
Yeah, and does all the time. And I felt the same way watching this film, where I was laughing my ass off, but then something horrible would happen. I was like, oh shit. And it kind of brought me back to like, oh, this is also tension filled. So this little film like completely nailed it as far as the comedy horror tone they were going for.
One thing I wondered throughout the movie, I want to know why Jon seemed to have more powers than Dave. Does it just affect people differently? Because Jon is, from the first time he does it, he's jumping through time. He's making phone calls to Dave in the future, however the hell he's doing that, through the psychic plane, through the hot dog, like you started this with.
Coming back to life.
Right. And we see Dave go into the past one time.
Right.
Right, really. But Jon seems to be jumping through time throughout the entire movie. He's always calling Dave, am I dead yet? Did this happen yet? Did this happen yet? So he's constantly doing that. And it seems like Dave's powers are kind of tame by comparison.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think maybe because it just goes to show that Jon's just like more all in, because he was the initial one that's just like, where Dave's just like, well, as soon as you saw a needle, like you should have been like out, right? Like at a party, like someone brings out a needle, a normal person would be like, oh, fuck this, you know. It just like jumped a bunch of steps, I'm out. Where Jon's like, oh no, how could I not? You know, he's the party guy, so his veins are probably loaded with the soy sauce, which is another weird thing. Again, now you got me picking shit apart, which is like the vial that comes out of the freezer.
Yeah.
And only 2 like pills fall out of it, which turns out to be like little fly creatures. But it's like, where are they getting this like constant supply of soy sauce? Because
where'd they get it in the future?
Exactly. So who's making it? How are they getting it? That's a thing.
I have a theory. I have a theory on where the soy sauce comes from, maybe.
Okay.
So when he breaks into the apartment, into the Jamaican's apartment, you know, when the fly stuff comes and gets him, he sees a weird tank with like a crazy umbilical thing going into the tank.
Oh,
and there's some creature that is unexplained that it doesn't attack him. It doesn't anything. It's just a weird thing living and pulsating in this tank.
Okay.
And I wonder if maybe that's the thing that makes the soy sauce.
Ah, that would make sense, and that would make sense why at the end, when he's talking to Paul Giamatti and he takes him to the parking lot where he has one of those things that maybe not necessarily, because the one that you're referencing looks kind of aquatic because it's like in a fish tank, and that one's just like kind of like jumping on the walls like the one that was in John's apartment earlier in the film. But yeah, like you said, maybe it's their blood that they're harvesting for the soy sauce.
Maybe. I don't know. It's never explained, but that's just kind of what I thought watching it, you know, again. Like, oh, maybe that's where it's made.
Yeah.
Because in the future, because they're years later still taking soy sauce.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing too. It's just like, oh, and then the Clancy Brown character doesn't really make sense. It's just like, how did he find the stuff? How is he connected? So again, this is a film. I don't want to say this is a film where you have to turn your brain off to enjoy it, because that's selling it way too short. Because like we said before, this has some really cool scenes that you could just like really enjoy, and that they put a lot of thought into. But however, like I said, the rules and just some of the other things, the wheels kind of fall out if you spend 20 seconds trying to pick it apart. And if you're doing that, then you're watching the wrong movie, because I think this is just made to be wildly entertained through the 100-minute runtime, and then it's done, and then you're like, wow, that was really cool. I'm glad that it exists. On to the next thing.
Yeah, well, like I said, I feel like that's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like it's all supposed to make sense. I don't feel like it's all supposed to tie up neat and tidy in a little bow. You know, I think it was written and put together just to be the silly movie that it was, that they put a bunch of stuff in.
Yeah.
Let's have an amputee because we're going to have a ghost door in the end, and she needs her phantom hand.
I love that.
To open the ghost door.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that.
But in the beginning, it's a clumsy gag where they have an amputee. She's got a really crappy prosthetic, you know, and it's just kind of a gag. And again, it's just another, it just feels very much like another, how much crap can we put in this movie? I know, let's throw an amputee in.
Right.
You know, like there's people in the room just shouting out ideas, and they go, okay, how can we cram this silliness into this movie?
Or how do we cram some more tension in? Because it may have just been me, but I was fucking freaked out when, you know, Super Mario was in the room.
Interrogation room.
Thank you. Was sitting with him in the interrogation room the whole time, and he's constantly looking over his shoulder, and he sees him, and he's just like, oh, it's just another cop just kind of checking shit out. And then he's on the phone with John. He's just like,
from the future.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, just walk out. He's like, but there's a guy in here with me. He's like, oh, he's not real. He's like, oh, sweet, he's not real. He probably can't hurt me. Oh no, he could definitely hurt you. I was like, oh my god, this is so fucked. Like,
right. But then the guy's mustache comes off and turns into a fucking bat. So,
which is equally disgusting because it's not like it just comes off his face in like a fun way. It rips off his face.
Yeah, and you see where it ripped off. But now you got this mustache bat flying around the room and getting all up in Dave's grill.
Again, laughing and disgusted at the same time. Yeah, man. This was so much fun. Another great scene when they go to the other, the alternate dimension, and they're sitting on these thrones, and it literally says like Dave and John on them. And they're going through and they're giving the history of like Snarlack or whatever it doesn't matter, whatever that thing was
Korok.
called. Yeah. Oh, hold on. Let me switch the storytelling method into something that's more acceptable to humans in cartoon form.
Here's
and then it just
cartoon.
Completely goes off the rails, and it's just like the most horrifying thing you could see. It's like kids getting ripped up and like this baby doll like thrown in the air, and by the time it lands, it's like all this like this massacre happens. It's just like, oh my god.
And then they cut back to the real world where it's just showing real life body parts everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah, it was great. And all of that was people getting ripped apart by spiders. So as re-education, That was their re-education program, was people getting ripped apart by spiders. If they did not believe in Korok.
When I turned it off and like the credits rolled, I'm like, okay, that was a movie that just happened. And initially I'm like, I wish that movie would have ended 10 minutes earlier. Not because it felt long, like it was paced fine. The movie's like super brisk. But just story-wise, I'm like, oh, I wish it would have ended at the whole, like, Paul Giamatti reveal. But then I was sitting there, I'm like, no. This was rad. It's just, like, these two kind of, like, you know, Harold and Kumar type, like, these kind of stoner dudes are just like, oh, we need you to save our universe. And they just, like, so annoyed. They're just so annoyed by it, and they just, like, lazily walk away and just, like, opt out. They're like, yeah, no, your universe is fucked. Like, we just want to play basketball. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I loved it. So it took me a second to be like, yeah, you know what? No, that was pretty good.
Well, you didn't really know what you were getting into to begin with, right?
Right.
So I knew what to expect when I first watched it the first time, just because I'd read about it. I knew where it was coming from. And so I enjoyed it for the same reason. If you read a book and the movie actually turns out to be really good and you're excited about it. It was that same kind of thing where it's like, oh, here's this author I've been reading all these random funny articles from, and now he's making a movie, and I can't wait to see what he comes up with, because I knew what his writing style was before that.
Sure. And did it disappoint or did it surprise you?
No, I don't think it did either. I think I got what I was looking for out of the movie. But, you know, I read an article that he wrote himself about the movie that was being made. So it's pretty great. Yeah.
This was awesome. People tore it apart when it came out. A lot of, like, you could barely find any reviews on this on YouTube, which is just a tragedy. But the people that did review it just was like, oh, this was dumped in January for a reason, and blah blah blah. This was totally missed the mark on this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, oh my god, like, you totally. It's all these fucking, you know, kind of highbrow snobs. Christian Harloff, not naming names ever. I found myself yelling at a 7-year-old review in the comment section of one of these critics, just like, you totally missed the mark on this. Like, this is super disappointing that everyone kind of thought it was this and they didn't. And I'm not saying like, oh, you know, everyone has to like this film or you're a pretentious asshole. If you just kind of step out of your own skis just a little bit and just like, yeah, you know, if you watch a lot of films or whatever and you just want to have like a good time, this is the film for you. This is like, I'm in the middle of like watching a million movies for a million different things, and this felt like the ultimate palate cleanser. And I was just like, now I'm like reset. Now I can kind of get back into the grind of like watching some, I don't know, quote unquote more highbrow shit. But this was just a lot of fun. This was Scott Pilgrim if Scott Pilgrim had like no budget to it. And I would definitely recommend people go watch this.
I would too. And I feel like anyone that's hating on it probably doesn't understand. My guess is that they're hating on the things that is exactly what it's supposed to be. What I've been saying throughout this, that it was made with intention. It was made to be cheesy. It was made to have all of these, you know, stereotypical horror tropes or whatever else. That would be my guess. I haven't read the reviews, but my guess is they are hating and commenting on for not understanding that all that stuff is intentionally jammed into that movie.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it's for. That's what it's about.
And there's just so much put on the two leads that had zero to no experience, and I think they did it flawlessly. I looked at both of these guys, and they've done some things here and there after this, but not much. Like, they were just kind of in this movie, and I was like,
right,
damn, you did really well. Like, I think this movie was cast flawlessly. I think everybody's character was given time to, room to shine, especially my boy Jimmy Wong. I kid, but that was just super cool.
Nerd.
To see him in this. I was just like, oh my god. Like, I had no idea that Jimmy Wong was in this film, and I think that in the limited screen time that he gets in this, he did a great job. And seeing Doug, and I love seeing Doug Jones all the time. Like, Doug Jones is just naturally creepy, so whenever he could be creepy without makeup, it's always a good time.
Oh, yeah, he's creepy in general. And I would say, you know, you'd mentioned that last movie that we talked about, The House 2, acting in that was pretty atrocious. You know,
good for the 80s.
Right. But 2 or 3 of these people, or a few of these people, are people that have had like serious acting careers over the years. These guys, for being completely unknown, I think did a great job. They played it for what it's supposed to be, and they did it perfectly.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always fun seeing Mr. Krabs say fuck, and he does get to do that in this film.
Mr. Krabs?
Yeah, Clancy Brown. That's Mr. Krabs.
Oh, really?
In SpongeBob, yeah.
I did not know that.
So he didn't say like, "Oh, fuck SpongeBob, my boy," but you know, he did get to say the F word, and that's always fun to see. But yeah, that's John dies at the end. So it you know, AKA John dies in the middle, and then comes back because the dog has lightning on his nose. Who knows? We're going to let you all be the judge. Are we completely off base? Is this just a complete schlocky mess? Or is there a lot of enjoyment? And is this like a hidden gem that no one talks about and no one... It's you know, categorized as a cult film. And this movie completely flew under the radar for me. And I look for these types of films. And it took this guy, this schmuck, Coleman Yeti, to show me the light. So, with that said, where can everyone find you, sir?
Well, first, let me say, yes, I would also love to hear what you all think about this movie. And if you think it's terrible, let me tell you why you're wrong. Beyond that, you can find me at Coleman Yeti on Instagram and on Twitter. You can also check me out on my friend's YouTube channel, Two Bananas Adventures and Gear.
Excellent. You can follow me on Twitter at John the Host. You could follow this very podcast at The Cult of Films. You could also listen to this in podcast form on iTunes, Spotify. Leave us some soy sauce. We would greatly appreciate it, because I want to see what happens after 2020, because we only have a couple weeks left of this fucked up year, and I am so done with it. So I need some good news. So I need some soy sauce, people. Send it my way. I have a P.O. box in the description below. Wouldn't it be funny if I just got a bunch of soy sauce?
That would be awesome.
That would be pretty awesome. And if people actually watch the show, it might actually happen. Anyways, this was fun. Let's do it again sometime.
For sure.